All right, guys, this will be the week 3 Intel video. I don't really have any announcements, so I'll just go ahead and get into it. The waiver pickups for this week, the waiver wire is looking pretty limited right now. Don't see a whole lot of impact players. But the first guy I want to cover is Trey Tucker. I don't really think Trey Tucker is going to be a fantasy viable piece this season, but you have to talk about his 42-point game. So big game there, but again, I don't really think that's a sign of things to come. And then these next 3 guys, I really don't even think these guys are starters right now, but I think these are the 3 guys that I could see carving out decent roles on playoff teams in fantasy this year. So Torrey Horton, kind of spoke on him last week. Solid player. Luther Burden, pretty explosive player and had a long touchdown this week, so might get some more work in the Bears offense, especially if the Bears offense improves. Could be a good piece. And then Ollie Gordon. He got his career high in carries this week and got a goal line touchdown, so could look to get some more work there. All right, so before I get into the trade guys for this week, I just wanted to circle back on some of the guys I had talked about last week. Jamar Chase and Saquon Barkley both had down weeks this past week, and it's not like a victory lap on that because they could easily have big weeks throughout the rest of the season. But it's just a glimpse of what some different game scripts for those specific teams could look like. And I think those players definitely took hits on their value in the trade market. Then the guys to trade for, TJ Hawkinson and Ricky Pearsall, each had some pretty good games this week. And then Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, he got more work than he had in the past, but it seems like it's still pretty split up there in the Washington backfield. So just a little recap on the guys from last week. All right, so this week, first guy I had to trade away is J.K. Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins has returned great value so far for Colt, and I also think Colt is in a position where his running backs have stayed healthy, and some other running backs have gone down, and there's a high demand on the running back position right now, and with J.K. Dobbins' current output of points being an RB1 as the RB9 right now, I think there's a good opportunity where Colt could cash in and improve his lineup if he moves J.K. Dobbins. He's had a touchdown in each of the first 3 weeks. I don't know that I'd expect that to continue. All right, the next guy here, Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker is like hit or miss for me. Once again, running backs in high demand, and like I said, I don't know if this was until week 1 or maybe this was even in the power rankings maybe. Kenneth Walker, very similar to Chris Carson, where when he plays, he's generally going to average a solid outcome throughout the season. But the reason I have this picture in the bottom left is it's not necessarily his points per game, because he'll take those points per game out of the running back position, but it's just the games played. So you've already gotten 3 games out of Kenneth Walker, so I think right now could be an opportunity for Jack to maybe add an impact wide receiver for Kenneth Walker. The first trade for guy I have is Terry McLaurin, and Terry McLaurin's had a pretty disappointing season so far. I think that has to do with his holdout and then also with Jaden Daniels missing the game this week. But I think Terry McLaurin throughout his career has shown that he's a great fantasy wide receiver. He usually is pretty up and down, but with this slow start, I think you'll see the back half of the season tend to be much higher than it has thus far. Also, Terry being on Joe's roster, I think it's definitely a player that is available. Joe has a pretty deep team, so I don't know that Joe's necessarily looking to get rid of him, but I think he's definitely a player that, if given a good offer, I think Joe would be willing to move off of. The next trade for candidate I have is Teteroa McMillan. This is a guy that I tried to trade for with Grayson, but I think Grayson also recognizes Tet's value. He's performed okay so far, like 11.7. Isn't that far off from a wide receiver 2 at this point, but I'm projecting him to finish much better on the year. If you've watched any of his highlights or anything like that, he has phenomenal talent, and every time I watch him, I just think of Mike Evans. But I think he is a player that I don't know that Grayson's necessarily going to give away very easily, but I think if you're looking to shake up your roster and take a swing, I think this is a player that I'd be willing to take a swing on. The last trade for piece here is Brian Thomas Jr. This is another guy that I've targeted in trades. He hasn't played too great so far. In fact, he's actually gotten quite a lot of flack from the media. But I think we all know that Brian Thomas Jr. is a very talented player. It's just a matter of if the Jaguars' offense is going to produce fantasy players, because right now it's pretty spread out and it's pretty erratic. Like, you don't really know where the points are going to come from. So the other thing with Brian Thomas Jr. is that his best games from last season were with Mac Jones. So it's still kind of yet to be seen to see if Brian Thomas Jr.'s ceiling is achievable with Trevor Lawrence. And then just kind of a closing note here, with this being the end of week 3 in fantasy, this is kind of the point where I think most trades you'll be able to get your most value, because after week 3, if you have 4 great weeks with a player, it's going to be very hard for you to move him for a trade that would be realistic for another team. And then the other side of it is, if you have a player that you're very high on and they perform bad 4 weeks in a row, 4 weeks is just, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it's much different than the first 3 weeks of the season. And it's going to be really hard to get a return that you would be willing to get rid of that name cachet for a player like that with any sort of solid return. So I think this is a really good week if you are on the fence about trading a guy, to just go ahead and take that shot. And not all trades have to be like clear winners. Like, it's okay to take a trade even if you think you're getting 45% value and the other guy's getting 55% value. If you believe in the player you're trading for, or you believe that the player that you have right now is valued higher than he actually is, it's okay to go ahead and make that move. So that's all I got for this video. I will have the recap video out Wednesday night. So thank you guys.